Hello and welcome back to The Next Act. I'm your host, Keaton Hall, along with my co-host, Matthew Roop. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever you choose to social media. Leave a like and it will help us reach more and more people that want to hear stories like our guest today. Today's episode is officially brought to you by a new Season 3 segment we like to call Cheers to a Next Act. This episode's Cheers is a tribute to the woman who is nothing short of a U.S. sports and soccer legend, Alex Morgan. Morgan's collegiate career at the University of California, Berkeley launched her into the domestic and European professional league spotlight, where she won titles with 4 different clubs. However, she shined brightest in red, white, and blue on the international stage. She ranks 8th all-time as the leading international goal scorer from her 224 Team USA appearances, where she won both an Olympic and 2 World Cup gold medals as a part of a legendary U.S. women's national team who brought a wave of deserved attention to women's soccer. Morgan officially retired in October 2024 as a career fan favorite. So cheers to your next act, Mrs. Morgan. Now, in the words of the official University of Kentucky Wildcats athletic page, our guest today was a 4-year Kentucky women's tennis star, a captain, 4-time SEC academic honor roll athlete, helped the University of Kentucky to 4 SEC and 3 NCAA tournament appearances, is a recipient of the 2015 Arthur Ashe Jr. Sports Scholar Award and 2016 Ethnic Minority Scholarship Award, was the University of Kentucky's nominee for 2016 NCAA Woman of the Year, graduated from UK with a degree in kinesiology and exercise science before obtaining her master's degree from Eastern Kentucky University in physical education and sports administration, where she also was the women's assistant tennis coach. She then was the head coach for the Kennesaw State men's and women's tennis programs before her current role as the executive director of the Atlanta Youth Tennis and Education Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no other words that could possibly introduce this great guest, Mrs. Kirsten Robles. Kirsten, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thank you all for allowing me on. I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to chat. You made me sound way cooler than I actually am. And I feel like after hearing that, I feel like I lived like 10 lives. Like, I'm like, wow, like that seemed like ages ago. So,
right?
Yeah.
No, it's very funny how just a trip down memory lane can make you remember, like, oh my gosh, I did actually do all these things. Because it's very easy to forget when it's not just in the front of your mind. So
Yeah.
glad to spark some memories there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me. And I'm excited to talk about the topics. And I think this conversation that you all are having and bringing to this podcast is very needed, and it's a lot of athletes can relate, former student athletes, and I'm just grateful that you two have taken the initiative to put this in a larger platform and get this out there so that other people can not take so much time and not worry so much about what their next act's going to be, but embrace that next stage of their life. So
definitely appreciate that. I mean, you summarized the podcast better than I could. So as a switch up from previous episodes, instead of me telling your story, I figured I would have you tell your story of your first act of tennis all the way to present day. Doesn't have to be super detailed, but just to give context for the listeners of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I would start my story by saying our family is just full of athletes. I'm one of 6 kids. My dad played college football, professional football. My mom did track and field. All of my cousins play sport. Some play professional, some play. So like it was destined. I guess it was very normal for us to think that we would grow up and play sports. And so sport was always something that was always in our household, but the idea of what would it be was something that was very open. I started off as a soccer player. I thought that would be like my passion. Like I love soccer. We all played soccer. I was like the 4th out of 6. So I was that kid that was always, tagging along, never really given full attention because I'm a middle child, but like, always like if they're doing it, I'm doing it type of thing.
Yep.
And so my brothers and sisters, they were all doing soccer. And so I would go to every game tagging along. And then one of our neighbors that lived right down the road had a tennis court in their backyard, and he played college tennis. And so he came and asked my parents if he could give summer lessons, to the neighborhood kids to make some money while he was home. And my parents were like, yeah, sure. Because obviously, being homeschooled, any extra activities are like a yes, always.
For sure.
And so that's kind of how we started tennis. But I honestly, I hated it. Like, I thought it was too technical. I thought it was too many things going on. I was like, I just want to kick the ball and that leave it at that. And so I didn't like it. And I really just kind of balked the whole time we would go to lessons. I'd be like, yeah, this is not for me, but I'll do it because everyone else is doing it. And I'm the tag along. I'm the middle child. Like, you're going to hear a lot of middle child. We kind of just do
Perfect.
whatever everyone else is doing. And so did it for the year, but I remember really taking off, and he told my parents, like, your family has very good, like, promise. Like, my two older brothers and my older sister, like, they could be pretty good. Like, you should start putting them in tournaments. And so my parents were like, we don't know what this sport is, but, like, sure, we'll put them in tournaments and just see what happens. So they started putting us in tournaments, and we actually started doing really, really well. And my brother started playing the sport at 13, which in the tennis world is very late. Like, you should not be
Yeah.
starting tennis at 13. You should be starting tennis at like 5 or 6.
Oh wow.
And so he started late. I was the youngest of the group. I was 8 at the time, so I was the youngest out of the older 4 to
Nice.
start. And so I remember playing my first tournament at 9 and actually going to the tournament in Huntsville, Alabama. So it was like an hour and a half drive from where we're from. And we play the tournament. I'm playing like the 10 under group or whatever. Ended up winning the tournament, like just
Sure.
going there winning it. And I remember like because I'm very competitive. I remember just like the thought of winning and getting a trophy, just something clicked of like, I love this. Like I want to do this. And so fast forward to, I would say probably from 9 to 10, I started playing, competing, training more, but I ended up being like one of the top like 10 under players like in my state and like doing really, really well, and starting to play more tournaments, starting to travel more. But I would say my story is again marked by my oldest brother, John, middle brother, Jacoby, and then older brother, sister, Kristen. They were the priority. They were like, okay, if they're going to do something with tennis, because they were starting to play too and starting to get really involved also. So they're like, if they're going to play, we're going to make sure they have the resources to be successful versus, and I was just like, wherever they were training, I was training, wherever they were doing, I was doing. So it wasn't until I was probably like 11, 12, 13 that my parents started to note that like, okay, she has a talent. She could be pretty good at this. And I shared with them I wanted to play professional tennis, and that was like the goal. So I remember, thanks to my parents, really traveling. I remember being like a 10-year-old, flying out to Dallas for like a national tournament in Dallas and playing against all of like the top 10, girls in the country. And then like winning like third place and having this trophy that was like taller than me, like sitting next to me on the plane, like back home. Like, and everyone was just like, oh, like, congratulations. But I remember like my dad like fly me out there. We went to like a Dallas Maverick game, like sat like and got to see like
Nice.
Dirk Nowitzki. Like it was just like I remember like all these different moments like so early on, and I
Uh-huh.
remember like flying out to California and playing like one of the top tournaments there, and called the Easter Bowl. And I remember like me and my dad were out there for like 8 days, just like staying in the hotel, like playing, competing, all the different things, and like flying home there. And I remember one moment that I have that still sticks with me is that because at the time I was with Prince, I had a contract with Prince,
Oh
like a
wow.
sponsorship with Prince. And I remember I was at the Easter Bowl, and one of the last couple of days I was there, and my rep like came up to me and she was like, "Hey, like you're having a great tournament. Like this is awesome. You're doing really, really well." And I remember like coming back from California and like coming back home, and on the front porch like a big box from Prince, and it was like brand new gear, brand new stuff, saying like great
Dang.
tournament, like good job. And I remember like as like a 13-year-old kid, you're like, oh, this is like really, really this is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so tennis really took me a lot of different places, and I started having opportunities to train at other places, work with some of the best coaches in the country, had really good coaches that really poured into me from like 12 to like 14, 15. And so really as a 13, 14-year-old, I was already playing in like the 16s and 18s. So I was already like
Mm.
playing up.
Dang.
So and had started playing like international tournaments called like ITF. So
Hmm.
by the time I was like 14, 15, I had made that branch of like, okay, I'm ranked in the 14s. I think at the time I was like top, I don't know. I'm not going to, because I don't remember, I'm not going to say a number, I don't know. But I was like one of the best juniors in the country in the 14s, but also in our southern region, which are the 9 states like North Carolina, South Carolina. So there, in tennis, there's sections. There's like the southern section, the Florida section, the Middle West section. I mean, there's different sections in the country, and you only play in your section, you play in your state, or you play like nationally. So tournaments are like national tournaments, sectional tournaments, state tournaments. And so I would, top in the section for the 16s and also top for the section in the 18s. So like at 14. So it was like, so I started to move and play more. And I remember telling my parents, like my dream for all of it, I was like, I want to play in Wimbledon one day. I want to play pro. Like that's like the goal. Like college, what's college? Like I want to play pro. And so I was working with a coach at the time here in Atlanta, and he was super great, awesome, and I still to this day respect him so much and love the work that he put in and how he mentored me and worked with me. But I remember he was like, Kirsten, I think it's like, let's go play some 10Ks, which is like the lower level, like pro tournament level you can play, just to see what happens. But I think I say all that to say I think I was riding this huge wave of like success and have all these things going for me. I'm training with some of the best girls in the country. I have great coaches. I have like a sponsorship. I'm moving up. I'm doing well. I'm winning. I was like, the USTA like female like player of the year for like, I mean, it's just like all these different things were like going right for me until it went very wrong, which was injuries. And so to make a long story short, from 15 and a half to 17, I did not play any competitive sports. Because I just had a series of like injuries and primarily my shoulder that really like took me out of the game. And, and this was also like peak recruiting time, like 14, 15, like we were doing our spring cleaning, like getting rid of the stuff this past weekend. And I stumble across a box that says like tennis memories. And so I start like opening like this box and like going through it. And I'm like, oh, there's a letter from Ohio State. There's a letter from Michigan. There's a letter from Harvard. There's a letter from UNC. There's a letter from NC State. I'm like all these like schools. I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot. Like, so I was at the time I was like a blue chip recruit. So like one of the best recruits in my class. So I was getting all the letters. So I was like any college I would have wanted to go to, I could have gone to on a full ride. Like everything was aligning so beautifully for like this amazing, like, career, whether in college, pro, whatever. And so that is when, from 15 to 17, that whole period, but I did not play. I literally fell off the radar for like a year, which is like the biggest year of recruiting or just making your move in the pro league. I like fell off the radar and did not play due to a shoulder injury. And I actually gave up like my dream of tennis in that period of time because I had been to like 7 different specialists, like all these different people, and all of them said the same thing, like, we don't know what's going on, we don't know how to fix this.
Oh my gosh.
We need surgery, we need this, we need that. And I'm like, well, surgery is like year recovery, this, all these different things. And I'm like 16 years old, just like what is happening to me? And we would go to the best of the best. I mean, we were trying to find a solution and it just didn't really like work out. I remember the last doctor I went to just said, tennis is not in your cards. I would just give it up and, retire,
Wow.
so I'm just like, oh gosh. So it went from like really, really good to like really, really bad very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I would say for me, that is when I had to face the fact that my identity and who I had made myself to be was solely based on my tennis career and not on who I was as a person. And that is when it like really hit me. Cause I remember I went into this just state of like depression and just like, what is my life if this is not a thing anymore? Like, who am I if this is not a thing anymore? And it was like, and I remember just like having so many moments of just like not wanting to be at home. I'm like, I haven't spent time at home in the past like 3 to 5 years. Like I'm out home every weekend and all my friends are texting me like, why are you not at this tournament? Like, where are you? Like, and I'm just like, I'm sitting at home. Like, you know what I mean? So it really was frustrating. And I remember just really struggling through from like 15 to 17 and a half of like, what's my identity? Who am I? And I would say I actually, in that period of time is when I gave my life to the Lord. So that is when, from like 15 and a half, 16, 17, that's when I found the Lord. So in that moment, I remember saying okay, tennis was my everything. Now I have a new identity, but I remember saying like, Lord, you gave me this gift that I'm really, really good at. So like, I'm going to give it back to you. And if you want to give it to me, like, give it to me. Like, but
Yeah.
if you don't, I'm okay. Like, I'm totally okay with it. So I remember I downloaded, because my dad played football for Alabama. So we are like, he played under Bear Bryant at Alabama. So
Oh, wow.
we're
That's
like
awesome.
grandfathered into like the scholarship. So like we could go to school essentially like free, like at the
Oh,
University of
wow.
Alabama, because of that reason. So I actually pulled applications for like Alabama and Auburn and was just gonna like apply to go be a regular student and just be like, okay, like sports no longer a thing. I'm just gonna go to like a regular school. And so I, in that process, start doing that thing, and I really just gave tennis up. I was like, Lord, I don't know why you gifted me with this incredible gift, but like, it seems like my time's up. So like, I'm just gonna move on with the rest of my life. And so
Yeah.
it was a very cool moment of like losing like thinking my identity is one thing, losing that one thing, floundering for several months to almost a year, and then like having a big like another identity placed in, and then living in that and being so free to be like, okay, I'm free, like wherever you want to take me, I'll go, you know. So it was like a weird like shift in that,
Yeah.
or not, I wouldn't say weird, like a powerful shift, I think.
Yeah.
And so I remember my mom she's a talker. Like she will, if you meet her, like she's going to tell you her life story. Like, it's just like, that's what it is. And so she was like randomly talking to one of her friends, and she goes, yeah, like my daughter was a really good tennis player, but her shoulder, got messed up, and like, she's going to quit. And she was telling like my life story to this woman. And so the lady was like, oh, I know this doctor, like, who's really, really good. He no longer practices. He uses he uses a lot of techniques that are not used in modern medicine just because of like insurance billing. They're too expensive. And sometimes what they use is not what they could be using, but insurance bills, they have to,
Yeah.
you all get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so he was actually in Tuscaloosa, which is like an hour and a half from where our house is in Alabama. And so we called him, we went for an appointment, and he did an evaluation. He was like, I can fix this, but like, give me a year. Like, I can fix this, no surgery. We have all these different machines. We can do this, but like, give me a year and you'll be pain free and you'll be back out on court. And I was like,
Wow.
no one had said that to me in like in a very long time. And so went to his practice. We would drive like 2 or 3 days a week. Actually, yeah, 2 or 3 days a week. We would drive down with my dad, and I would go to his office, sit there, get worked on, and then come back with like my shoulder just like so inflamed, because he would do all these like very interesting techniques. I learned how to do handstands at his office. I learned how to do like inversions. It was
Wow.
very like a lot of very like outside of the box techniques. And so we did all this work, but the commitment, so thankful for my parents who like drove me there and got me there and did all the rehab and did everything they needed to do to make sure that I could give this a chance. And so I remember I spent a good amount of time at this practice, and I remember January of my senior year, I played and hit a ball pain free for like the first time in like a very long time.
Wow.
And so it was like, whoa, like this. Okay, so maybe tennis is back on the table. Maybe tennis is, back there. And then I remember just like at that time emailing so many coaches and be like, hey, remember me? And they're like, where have you been? Like, what happened to you? What happened? We were wondering what happened to you. Like, we didn't know what happened. So I remember emailing a lot of coaches and them saying like, do you have scholarships? Do you not? And just like coaches hitting me back saying like, oh my gosh, like if I would have known, and actually I know you're a big Michigan fan, but the Michigan coach I emailed, she goes, if I would have known you were back on the radar, I would have saved you a scholarship. Like, but like I didn't know that. So anyway, so emailed a bunch of coaches and tried to like salvage and say, maybe this is a dream that I can still fulfill. Pro is probably out of the picture, but college might be very much still in the picture. Emailed a bunch of coaches, set up a bunch of visits, and then by that August was enrolling at the University of Kentucky to play tennis.
Nice.
So, and it, for me, I think my college career segued that a year and a half of like learning true identity, getting tennis back, and learning that tennis wasn't who I was, really set me up to have a very like successful, well-rounded college career at Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's way better than what I was going to say. So
Yeah.
that's incredible. Matthew, you want to lead off with the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you covered a ton there. So, but you mentioned kind of at the beginning of your journey that you grew up in a household full of Division I athletes. And you touched on it a little bit, but what was it about tennis that kind of drove you to pursue that over some of those other sports, like your first love, soccer, and that kind of stuff?
Honestly, I think it was just that moment of like, I'm very competitive and I was like, this is something that I could do well in. So it was just like, why not? And I think, because I didn't really know of anything about tennis. I think I watched my first tennis match and I was like, what is this? Like, what is this? I didn't grow up in a household that watched tennis. I didn't grow up in a household that knew anything about tennis. Like, none of my family played tennis. Like, most of my family is like track and field, basketball, and football. So it's just like, for me in tennis, it was like, it really odd. And my parents didn't know much about tennis. They were like, what is this too? But I think it was just more so of, I'm actually really good at this. So like, let's just keep going. And I'm very competitive. So it was like, if I win one tournament, okay, let's go win another one. And it just kind of snowballed into like more and more and more. Looking back, I never really have a thought of like, why did I choose tennis? It was more so, it feels so, because it gave me so much over this like 20-year period. It's just
Sure.
like, I never questioned like, why tennis?
Sure. Just felt natural to you.
Yeah, it felt like something that I could set goals and achieve them. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of my mindset as a 9-year-old. Just like as a 9-year-old, it's like, this is something that I can do and set goals and I can achieve, and I can be good at something, and I can win. I can beat people. I can, be successful. So
Yeah, I mean, especially in a household where you have siblings that are all Division One athletes as well. Like you always are trying to, especially as a middle child, trying to get a one up on them. And if you find something like this where you're not only really good at it, it comes really naturally, and you're only continuing to get better, like it just
yeah.
makes sense that you want to continue to run with it.
Yeah. And I think my brother, he was like, my oldest brother, John, like he started at 13, but like he was so passionate about it and he would practice so much and he put so much time and effort into it. I think like him leading and then my other siblings leading as well and seeing what they were doing and what they were accomplishing. Cause so they're four or like in like 5 years apart, like from like oldest to youngest. And then there's two more that kind of came a little bit later. And so the four of us were very much in sync. So I think seeing them be successful, seeing them set goals, seeing them do well was like also what just kept me going along that path, and seeing them like shoot for college and seeing them talk to coaches and seeing them already kind of lay a foundation or lay a path. It kind of just made me like understand that world even more. In a way, I was very fortunate that I was fourth, because John was like the first one and he had to figure everything out on his own, and then I just kind of had to like watch and learn everyone else do different things. So
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, that's
contrary to
great.
popular belief, there is some benefit to being a middle child.
yes. I'm so thankful that I'm not a firstborn, because I just feel like firstborns, I feel like there's the expectation from I'm very fortunate to be I loved being the middle child, because I just felt like I could fly under the radar. I could do my own thing. No one cared about what I was doing, and they all laugh at me. They're like, Kirsten, you got away with like so much stuff. And I was like, my parents never even know I was doing those things, because like they didn't pay attention to me. Like they were like, you're the middle, especially when you're middle child of six. Like that's a lot of kids, so.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. So you mentioned a little bit that your highest aspiration was go to Wimbledon, be on the pro circuit. Did you ever, I know they kind of got derailed with the injuries and then having to kind of reintroduce yourself to the tennis world. Was there ever an opportunity to get back onto that pro circuit?
No, so throughout my college career, I had to baby my shoulder. So each summer I would take a significant amount of the summer off and rehab, and then go back to school, beat it up, and then come back for the summer, rehab it, go back to school.
Gotcha.
And also too, I think based on the career I had at Kentucky and the things I was involved in, it felt very much like when I was graduating, I didn't want to continue the tennis chapter, because I felt like there was so much more out there for me to go and attack and explore that was not tennis. And so when I graduated, I never considered, playing pro. I did play one time in like a pro tournament when I was at Kentucky, but like for me, I feel like that in the path that I walked and the things that I learned, it was just like, there's other things that I've called you to outside of pro tennis,
Yeah.
So it was just like a natural kind of like, this was great and all, but it's time for the next thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What about Kentucky kind of drew you there? I know, you talked a little bit that you kind of had your pick of the litter for a while, and then the injury kind of came up and you fell off the radar. But what about kind of Kentucky drew you to that program and that school?
So I had an encounter with the coach when I was 14. He was watching one of his recruits, and I was playing up in the 18s, and so he got to watch me play one of his recruits, and I ended up like winning that match. I remember he kind of like stood out for me in that he was there, and he ended up being at the tournament the whole time, and he was like watching, and I just remember kind of getting a first kind of impression of him. So when I took my official visits, I visited only Texas A&M, Auburn, and Kentucky. And so I remember my dad was saying, his feedback for me was, you want to go somewhere where you can win and be successful. And so for me, I was thinking I want to go somewhere where I can build something special. And so at the time, Auburn and Texas A&M were very established. I remember on my official visit to Auburn that Auburn beat Kentucky like a drum. Like it was not even close. Like absolutely destroyed them. And I remember my dad was like, we were getting in the car and he goes like, Kirsten, I think you have your answer after watching that match. And, like, okay, pick the better school, like, obviously, like, duh, you know what I mean? But for me, something really drew me to the fact, I think the coaches did a good job of like, at Kentucky, there was much to be done and I could be a part of doing those things. And so that's why Kentucky for me really stood out. And I think just when I went on my official visit, when I stepped on campus, it was just like I had a feeling of this is home. Like this is the place I want to go. And in the other two schools, I didn't really feel that. So I think you all took official visits. You kind of know like when you go, you're kind of like you see different things. You know what I mean? And so I think like when I went to Kentucky, it was just like this is the place that I should be to do this next 4 years. So. But I think, interestingly enough, I think when you do the official visits, you see all of the the rainbows and the butterflies, and then once you get there, you kind of see like the ugly, and you're like, oh gosh, okay, I didn't. So with every school, you're like, it's not perfect, you know what I mean? And Kentucky definitely wasn't perfect by any means, But I think when you're a student athlete, you make your experience what it is. I think if you rely on the school and the coaches and the team to make your experience what it is, then you're going to be greatly disappointed. But I think if you're outgoing and you're looking for opportunities to serve, looking for opportunities to get involved, looking for opportunities to better yourself, learn, then you will have a great career. Unless, again, I know there's some really interesting situations in coaching staffs and teams, unless there's a lot of external things that you're out of your control. But for the most part, we're given really good resources to be successful in the college space. So you just have to lean on them and use them and want to use them to really leave feeling like that you used the university, or the university didn't just use you and kind of like for 4 years and then like spit you back out again.
No, for sure. That was a great answer. How did your daily schedule and routine at Kentucky compared to what your daily schedule and routine looked like as one of the top recruits coming up in your between your kind of like teenager years and all the way up to being 15 years old? Was there a lot different, or was it pretty similar?
Very different in that I've been homeschooled my whole life. So like stepping into a college classroom was the first time I've ever been like in a classroom setting. So that was very different. The first time I had teachers you could actually talk to, because I did like virtual school. So the teachers were all like on a screen. So having teachers you could talk to, having classmates, doing like group projects with people was like freshman year was like, oh, this is, very interesting. Yes, exactly. So that was different for sure. I don't really think actually the training was less, because I think usually when you're training at academies, you're training about 4 to 5 hours per day and doing like an hour of like physio or an hour of like workouts or cardio or strength training or whatever. So it's about 6 to 7 hours per day. I remember I was training at academy in San Antonio, and it was like you wake up, breakfast, train till about 11:30, lunch, train again, go to the track, do workouts, come back home, dinner, and then you do schoolwork. And that was like every day. So like with tennis, it's a little bit different. Like you have morning practice, or you have, a track session, morning practice. You're done at about 11 or 12. You time block like 8 to 12. You eat lunch, and then you have all your classes. Then you have study hall, or you don't have study hall depending on how your grades are. And then you have your dinner, and then you go home. And I think at Kentucky, being an SEC school, you have the resources where, you have the all athlete dining hall that you go to, each night. You have the athletic study hall, you have all your tutors. And I was doing pre-med, so like I had tutors for pretty much every course. So like you're spending a lot of time in that building with your tutors. And I would say it was very, your schedule was pretty much like laid out for you. So I think that was very similar as well. But then also you throw in all the fun. I think when you're in academies, there's not a whole lot of fun that's really being had. But like I think in college, you have like the football games, you have the parties you go to, you have the different things that you can do and get involved in that make a difference. So I would say for me, it was very similar. I would say I would find myself doing more, in college because I felt like some of it was just not really enough for like keep up like my fitness level, keep up what I wanted to do. So there were times where we would finish a weight room workout and I would do an additional like cardio workout or a bike workout just to like do more,
Nice.
just to like make sure I was in the best shape that I could be in. So yeah, I honestly wish, I think in hindsight, I wish I would have done more. Like, I think I wish I would have used my coaches more, trained more. I think I would have eaten better. I think in hindsight, if I could go back as an 18-year-old girl and knowing what I know now, I think I would have really used these resources and really leaned into my coaches and really leaned into what they were trying to share with me, really leaned into growing my game, and really leaned into like the weight room. And I think I did do a really good job of that. But looking back, I'm like, I think a lot of it, you're in college, just your days are so long, you're trying to keep all your school, you're staying up late studying, waking up early, you're kind of just doing the best you can every day, and every day goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have just taken time to like do less. I think do less, but then put my time into what I was doing less of, but do it really, really well.
Yeah, that's a bar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a very common sentiment. Like, I think Keaton and I would probably say the same thing, but it's also easier to sit here when we're doing this instead of being an 18-year-old in college and trying to, fit in a social life
Very
and
true.
fit in all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because I go through some of that stuff now with our guys, and like I see this side of things, and I'm telling them that this is XYZ what you should be doing, and then I also know in the back of my head, like, well, I was doing the same thing that they're doing now, so when I was their age, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it. But we'll move on to the next question here. So, typically, kind of moving into like a Power 4 program as an underclassman, there's kind of a developmental period, and there typically isn't a lot of playing time that comes along with kind of being a first-year underclassman. However, for you, you kind of walked into Kentucky and were kind of a cornerstone for the program for 4 years. What about you as a player, as a person, kind of separated you from the rest of the pack, from, maybe the rest of your teammates, or even, kind of your class as they kind of went into, their freshman year as well?
Yeah, I think I went into, so I came into the team again, we were like the worst in the SEC. So when I first came on as a freshman, like we were like, I think there were 10 teams in the SEC or 11, and we were probably like 10 or 11 when I first joined the program. And that's why Dad was like, I think you have your answer because, Kentucky's like the worst, and like the two schools you're looking at are, much higher, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like top 25. Anyway, so I think the reason I played right away was one, just depth of skill at the time when I came in, and then also the reason I went to Kentucky was to be a contributor right away, and be in singles and doubles, things like that. And so I think that really played a part in it. And really with this idea of I don't want to be 10th or 11th from the bottom my entire 4 years. I want to like each year change that narrative. So that really helped a ton as well. And I think when I came in as a freshman, I brought in with me, it was just myself and another girl from Indonesia. And so she contributed right away as well and played, all 4 years also. And then each class after me got better and better, and better recruits came in, and they all contributed right away. And that's what really led to this new team, or this new culture within the team of, okay, we were, outside the top 100, 10th or 11th in the SEC, because SEC is a very strong conference for tennis. So 10th or 11th is not awful. I mean, you could be a top 50 team and still be 10th or 11th in your conference, because you have Georgia, who's top 5, Florida, like everyone's really, really good. So still not bad, and I think that was really probably why. And also too, just I think again, just the culture shift of what's it going to take to be successful. As you all know, I'm very competitive, and so there's really not much I would do to not win, or not much I would do to not make sure our team won. And so that's something that I think was helpful with like the new group of girls coming in as well. And so just trying to make sure that when we got in position to be successful, that I was doing my job. And I remember my freshman year, we were playing at LSU, and we were like, it was on a road trip. We had already played on SEC. You play Friday and Sunday, so it was a Sunday match. And I remember just like we all came out so flat. Like we just just you could just tell we were losing that day. Like you could just tell. Like when you're watching people, like we're losing, we're done. I remember my match in particular, it was like awful. Like I lost the first set 6-1, like losing. And I remember my assistant coach came over to me, and I was like my shoulder hurts, this is going on, I can't read this player, I don't know what's happening, whatever. And I was making up a lot of excuses. And I remember he just said, Kirsten, if you don't get your head out of your, I'm not going to say it. Like, we need, like, what are you doing? Like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. He like yelled at me for like a good, like the whole changeover. He was just like yelling at me, like, get it together. Like, this is not okay. And I was just kind of feeling sorry for myself. But I remember like, I told him, I was like, just give me Advil. Like, I just need Advil. Like, just give me like Advil. Like, I'll be okay or whatever. But I remember like getting off the changeover and like trying to like find something and turn around. I was like, yeah, this isn't me. I'm not doing well. But I ended up like winning the second set and coming back from being down like 5-0, losing the match, winning the second set.
Wow.
And some things with the other team shifted, because when you play all 6 courts of singles. We lost the doubles point, which only counts for 1 point, and then you play 6 courts of singles. And so I remember like looking down after the second set, and we had started turning matches and winning other courts. So I was like, oh wait, I'm in the second set, about to start. This is a score on the board. Like my match could be like the clinching, deciding match or whatever. But it turned out it was the clinching, deciding match. And I remember like literally being the last one out there as a freshman at LSU. And, we were tied 3-3, and I'm just like, and I remember my shoulder was just like in really bad shape. I remember like telling, and I laugh at this now, but I remember like every changeover taking like 2 Advil. And I think probably I took like 8 to 10 like Advil pills, just like trying to like not feel my shoulder. Cause I was like, I can win this match for my team. Like we can do this or whatever. But I remember like, all the team lined up, ended up winning the match, and we beat LSU. And so it was just, that whole freshman experience was the first time I clinched the match for the team, the first time I had a coach like get in my face like that. So it was just a little bit different. But I remember that feeling of clinching the match was like very much like, is it an addictive feeling of like, okay, like, and so I remember always saying, if it comes down to my court, we're not losing. And I think my team always said that too. Like, if there is a 3-all match, we want Kirsten playing, because like she's gonna give it all we got. We got the best chances to do those things. And so my favorite memory was clinching was at Alabama. So as you know, my dad's like an Alabama legend, played for Bear Bryant, his first black quarterback for Bear Bryant, for Alabama, et cetera, et cetera. So my dad is very well known there. So a lot of us did not go there because his shadow is just like really, really big. But we were playing at Alabama. This is my junior year at Alabama. Had never beaten Alabama, I think, at Alabama. Or maybe we had never beaten Alabama, because that year they were always in the top 10. And so they were number 9 in the country. We were number 14 in the country. So fast forward to freshman year, not even the top 100. By my junior year, we were a top 15 team. And so playing in Alabama, and so my dad was there, my family was there, and it was like packed. Like the stadium was like so full. Like AJ McCarron, I don't know if y'all know AJ McCarron. Like he was there for the match, all these different things. And and so it was started to rain. We move inside, and we're playing, and we had not beaten a top 10 team in like 10 years. It's some like crazy stat. We had not done something in a very long time. And it comes down to my court, and I remember I was down 4-1 in the third set. So I was like, okay, I'm losing. Like, I'm going to let my team down. It was packed. Everyone was there. My neighbor came up to watch. It was like so many people there. And so I remember my coach walked over to me, and he said, because we actually, during that trial weekend, we had to write letters to people and our coach told us, write a letter to someone that you wished could have the opportunity that you have right now to be like an SEC like or Division I athlete or whatever. So we had to like pick a person and write a letter. So I wrote my letter to a girl that I met when I was in Ethiopia after my sophomore year. So there's a girl that I met, her name was Deborah, and she told me she wanted to be a soccer player, and she said I don't think I would ever be a soccer player because I will never have the resources that it takes to like do that. So I wrote my letter to her, and so he said, Kirsten, like I want you to like think about who you wrote your letter to, and I want you to pull it out, and I want you to like read it on this changeover, and then go back out and play. And so I remember taking it out, reading it, and he was like, remember like who it is or whatever. And so I go back out, and it just like really, I remember just like looking up in the crowd, looking at my dad, just kind of like, okay, like what do I do? I'm down 4-1, like this is a chance to do something great for the university. And just kind of looking around and looking at my team and just kind of be like, okay, like we have to put in some work here. Like we're going to have to get this back on track. And so ended up winning 5 games in a row to win.
Let's go.
So like, I remember like literally like the dog pile of like everyone like jumping and like, and my coach is like, we just beat like a top 10 team. Like, I mean, I remember like, it was just like crazy. And like my dad was just like, it was just insane. But I think like even now, I mean, talk about my dad, like it was a very special moment for us. Cause obviously like, you know, he was very successful in Alabama, but seeing his daughter go to a school that was, you know, not as like struggling a little bit, but then to have that moment at Alabama in front of like so many people and have success, I think that was a very like proud moment for him to witness that and be a part of that. But that was probably like probably one of like my favorite memories overall of just like this idea of I went to Kentucky to be a part of something, to build something, and to be a part of something that hadn't been done before. And that was like my junior year, this moment of like, we're doing it. We're in this moment of building and accomplishing something really special as a team.
Yeah. I mean, that's quintessential, like the reason why you play sports, especially like you said, to go into a team that you can turn around and just to have that culmination of going from one of the bottom teams in the SEC to beating one of the top teams in the SEC, given all the circumstances of how special it was to your family and how you had gotten to that point in your journey. Like that's honestly like a type of story that they make a movie about. Like, oh, especially like being down at the spot where you're in this position to kind of turn it around and get to that kind of mountaintop almost. And then you have this moment with yourself and you remind yourself why you're doing it. And then just to have a hot streak like that is, I mean, I wish I could see that as a replay just because that'd be so cool to watch. And like, especially, I'm sure Matthew and then yourself can attest to this, but like that moment where you feel yourself get momentum. And like you said with the story before, the momentum, once you feel the tide start to turn a little bit, and then it's contagious and you can feel it with your team. And then having that much momentum and a comeback like that is such a great feeling, and it's hard not to get hooked on it for sure. So that kind of leads me into my next question of when you played, obviously growing up and then at the collegiate level, you're playing against the highest competition in tennis, not only playing and winning in several ranked matches, but also reaching multiple SEC and NCAA tournaments. What was your mentality when you were preparing for and going into a match where you knew you were playing the best of the best and it was going to require your best?
That's a really good question. And truthfully, I would say I think I can look back onto a couple SEC championships where we as a team just did not show up collectively, and it really cost us some tough. Matt, I think you all know kind of what I mean when I say we as a team didn't show up collectively. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It was the mood was off, the competitive level was off, the doubts were there, the fear was there, and we very timid. And so we missed out on some really cool stories or opportunities that we could have had in the SEC tournament. And so I feel like SEC tournaments, I think we would always go each year, but I always feel like each year we would never peak at the right time, you know? And so that was really frustrating. And I think, you know, my last 2 years of junior and senior, the goal always on the board was to host You have to be a top 16 team to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was always the goal of the year. We're going to host. And so we would always like hover in like, a really good spot. And as the tournament would come around and we would have like a huge like flop. And I remember my junior and senior year, we ended both years ranked 17. So
That's so
missed it, right? So it's like,
one outside of it. That's so
exactly. So
tough.
it's just like, for me, I think when I think about SC champion, I'm like, man, like we did some cool things, but at the same time, it's like, I still remember like just feeling that level of disappointment, like when you don't show up,
Mm-hmm.
when not
Yep.
everyone's firing at the right level, when not
Mm-hmm.
everyone is fully engaged and bought in
Mm-hmm.
to what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And it costs you, it really costs you like big when you're in college. And, and I think sometimes as a coach, I remember just like being in the locker room with my players and just basically like saying like, we didn't empty our tanks today. Like, and I think now I have the
Mm-hmm.
language for that. But I think when I was a player, didn't really know what that meant. But I'm like, I always tell my team, like, we have to empty our tanks. Like, I have to, your teammate has to look to you right and left and know that they're emptying their tanks. And whatever they
Mm-hmm.
gave that day, their tank is empty. And
Mm-hmm.
if the result is still a loss, then we're okay. But if
Mm-hmm.
you look to your right and left and the tanks, you walk off the court and the tanks are at 50 or 60 or 40 or 30, then you failed your teammate. You failed your team. Like that's what I would tell my team all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're a player, you don't really have that like language or that understanding. But now when you coach, I coached for 5 seasons. So it's like now I wish I could have had that vocabulary articulate like what I needed to do as a player to be successful so I could be a good teammate. And truthfully, there were days where my tank was still full. Like, you know what I mean? I wasn't at 0%,
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I think of special teams, when I know of special teams, when I hear special teams, I'm like, they embody this idea of tanks are all at 0
Mm-hmm.
when the match is over,
Love that.
And so, and that's where I feel like Kentucky, where we struggled in a lot in some key positions to host or do whatever, is just like there were matches where we all looked at each other and tanks were still full, and it's not good enough at that level to be successful.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point that you bring up, Kirsten, about the emptying the tank and not having any fuel left in the tank. And that made me think of how encompassing of a lifestyle a high performing athlete and team has to be in order to have the capacity to empty the tank. Because if you are not preparing correctly, if you're not doing the work on a daily basis from when you wake up to when you go to bed, if you're not going to bed on time, you're going to be tired. If you're not taking care of your schoolwork at a college level, you're going to be bleeding into time you could be getting better. So if you're not doing everything you need to do to prepare and fill up the tank in order to empty it, then you're only going to have a half a tank to empty. And that in and of itself is going to fall short. So that made me think of why it's so easy for athletes to make their entire identity or a lot of their identity in that sport. It's because if you truly are at a high level like you were growing up, it takes everything and your life has to revolve around it. So how would it not be a major part of your identity? So that just made me think of that aspect of being able to empty the tank.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we'll end on a little bit of a lighter note. What was your favorite part about being a tennis player at Kentucky?
I would take the tennis part out and the player part of it. I would say my favorite part of being at Kentucky. One was the friends that I made. Like they're still my closest friends, my teammate. Like there are a few girls on the team that are still just like my closest, most dearest friends. The group of I hung out. So my two roommate, well, one of my roommates, she's from Indonesia, and another girl on the team in Indonesia. And so like the whole 4 years I spent mainly with like the Asian community at Kentucky. So like,
Nice.
I learned so much, and actually like that's why my love for Asian food is so strong, is because I spent like 4 years with them, like going to the Asian markets instead of going to the regular grocery store, like, you know what I mean? So like that was really special. But I would say like the connection and the community that I built, whether it's with like personnel or my academic advisors, like I created such a special community there at Kentucky, and I met a lot of cool people who really like poured into me. And I would say like my journey was not because of me, it was because of the people that took time to invest and really like adopt me and bring me in and really see something in me that I didn't see in myself, and really always put opportunities in front of me to be successful. I got to go to Ethiopia through the trip, which completely changed my life and the reason why I'm doing what I do now. Without that trip, I would be a doctor somewhere. I would be practicing medicine. You know what I mean? So I think like there were certain like key moments while at the University of Kentucky that forever altered my life. And I can always point back to those things of like, if this wouldn't have happened, if that wouldn't have happened, and even it goes back into, I think Keith and I, we talked about this a little bit offline, when we gather, but some of the people that I am still friends with now have been instrumental in my life even today,
Yeah.
and so I think without the University of Kentucky, I can say like it really set me up for the next phase of my life. Like it really equipped me to be successful where I am now. And it gave me tools and it gave me a platform to share who I am unapologetically, but also serve and pour into others too. And I couldn't imagine spending 4 years other places. It wasn't perfect all the time, but I can point back to like 3 or 4 key things that are shaped 100% what I'm doing now and the life that I live now.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
One of the best ways to use your first act and help you in your next act as you continue to navigate things that are unknown.